It was a quiet evening in a small village where life moved at its own pace. People lived simple lives, working hard from dawn to dusk. The air was fresh. The trees stood tall, whispering secrets to the wind among the humble houses and winding dirt paths. There was an old man who sat beneath an ancient oak tree. Every day he watched the world go by with a knowing smile and eyes that held a lifetime of stories. One day a young man named David walked up to him, his face filled with frustration, his fists clenched in anger. He had struggled all his life, but nothing seemed to go his way. He had failed in business. He had lost relationships. He had tried and tried, yet he felt like life was against him. "Old man," he said with desperation in his voice, "why does life treat some people kindly while others suffer, no matter how hard they try? Why do I keep failing when all I want is to succeed? Why do some people seem to be blessed with everything, while others like me get nothing but pain?" The old man looked at David with a deep understanding. He had heard this question many times before. He gestured for the young man to sit beside him under the great oak tree. "David, my boy," he said gently, "do you see this tree? It has stood here for more years than anyone can remember. Its roots run deep, its branches stretch high and wide. Yet do you think it has never faced storms?" David frowned, not understanding the old man's point. "Of course it has, but it is strong enough to withstand them." The old man nodded. "Exactly, my son. Strength is not something given. It is something built. This tree has been through the harshest of winters, the strongest of winds, the hottest of summers. Yet it stands because it has grown through its struggles, not in spite of them." David sighed. "But I have tried, I have fought, I have worked harder than anyone I know. Yet I am still struggling, still losing." The old man picked up a small seed from the ground. "Do you know how this seed becomes a mighty tree?" David shook his head impatiently. "It must first break open and face the darkness of the soil." The old man explained, "It must push through the earth's struggle against the weight above it, fight for the light. If it stays comfortable within its shell, it will never grow. But if it dares to push beyond the soil, it will one day stand tall like this oak." David listened carefully, his frustration starting to fade, replaced by curiosity. "Life does not give strength freely. My son," the old man continued, "it tests you, it challenges you, it pushes you to your limits, not to break you, but to shape you. Each failure is a lesson, each struggle a tool, each hardship a fire that forges you into something greater." David looked down at his hands, remembering all the times he had fallen, all the times he had felt like giving up was the only option. "But how do I know if all this struggle is worth it? How do I keep going when everything feels hopeless?" The old man smiled, leaning back against the oak. "Do you stop climbing a mountain because the path is steep? Do you stop running a race because your legs ache? Do you stop searching for gold because the digging is hard? No, my son, you keep going because you know that the reward is worth the journey." David felt a spark within him, something he had not felt in a long time. He was beginning to understand that his struggles were not punishment, but preparation for something greater. The old man placed a hand on David's shoulder. "Remember this, my boy. You're not failing. You're growing the moment you start seeing your struggles as steps instead of setbacks. You will realize that you are already on your way to where you are meant to be." David sat there for a long time, his heart lighter, his mind clearer. For the first time in his life, he saw his failures not as signs to stop, but as reasons to keep going. Days turned into weeks, and David found himself returning to the old man, daily learning from his wisdom and applying it to his life. He began to see his challenges as lessons, each failure as a stepping stone rather than a dead end. One day he came running to the old oak tree breathless with excitement. "Old man," he called out, "I tried again. I failed. But this time I learned something, and I did not let it break me." The old man chuckled, leaning forward to listen. "Tell me what happened." "I tried starting my business again." David explained. "I approached it differently. I studied, I prepared, yet I still faced challenges. My first attempt failed, but instead of walking away, I adjusted my plan. I found another way, and now I have taken my first real step forward." The old man smiled proudly. "That is the way, my son. Failure is not the end, unless you let it be. Each setback is just a chapter, not the whole story." David nodded, understanding more and more each day. He saw that the world was full of people who had given up too soon, not realizing how close they were to success. He refused to be one of them. Months passed, and David kept pushing forward. His mindset changed, and so did his results. He built something from nothing. He made mistakes, but each one made him stronger. Each hardship made him wiser. He no longer feared failure because he knew it was simply part of the journey. One evening he returned to the old oak tree, but this time he was not a desperate young man looking for answers. He was a man with a purpose, a man who had faced storms and stood tall like the great tree before him. "Old man," he said, smiling, "I understand now life does not break you. It builds you every struggle, every loss, every pain. It is all part of the process of becoming something greater." The old man nodded, his eyes twinkling with pride. "You have learned well, my son, and now it is your turn to share this wisdom with others. There will always be those who feel lost, those who think they are failing, those who do not yet see that they are simply growing. Be the one to remind them. Be the one to help them see that their struggles are shaping them into something stronger." David bowed his head in respect. "Thank you, old man, for showing me what I could not see." Before the old man simply smiled, leaning back against the mighty oak tree. His work was done. The seed of wisdom had been planted, and it would continue to grow. As David walked away, he knew he would face more challenges, more failures, more struggles. But he was no longer afraid, because he now understood that every storm, every hardship, every trial was just another step on the path to greatness. And so he moved forward, ready to embrace whatever life had in store, knowing that he was not failing, he was growing.